This is the beginning of Liberation Day in America. And what we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States. If they're made in the United States, there's absolutely no tariff. We start off with a 2.5% base, which is what we were at, and we go to 25%. So I'll sign this, and we will see you again on April the 2nd. In terms of this, it's going to be another round, and it's about making America great again, making it strong and prosperous again. Thank you very much.
我が国は2019年以来、世界最大の対米投資国であります。で、日本企業は米国経済に多大の役割を果たしてまいりましたし、今もそうです。で、アメリカ政府に対しましてはこれまで一方的な関税措置についてさまざまなレベルで見直しを申し入れてまいりましたが、それにもかかわらずこのような措置が実施された。
There is a strange silence creeping across Detroit. The clang of steel presses, the sound of assembly lines, the rhythmic beat of workers clocking in, all replaced by hollow echoes in shuttered factories. Streets once crowded with shift-change traffic now look abandoned, like ghost towns caught mid-breath. Families who built their lives around steady auto jobs suddenly find themselves staring at empty paychecks, while dealerships display gleaming new models with price tags so inflated they might as well be museum pieces. It feels like déjà vu, echoes of Detroit's collapse during the Great Recession. But this time, the wound wasn't inflicted by Wall Street or reckless loans. It was a deliberate strike. Tariffs dressed up as patriotism. The White House promised tariffs would make America rich, bring factories back, and punish foreign competition. Instead, they triggered an exodus. In 2025, 5 of Asia's biggest automakers, Toyota, Nissan, Hyundai, Subaru, and Mazda, quietly began pulling out. The result? More than 38,000 American jobs were wiped out in a single year. So the question is unavoidable. What really happened, and where is all that leading? In this video, let's find out. Number 5. Mazda. Mazda's crisis unfolded in a way that showed how even smaller niche brands were not immune to the chaos that tariffs unleashed. For decades, Mazda had thrived as a company with a modest but fiercely loyal customer base. Its cars were often praised for their design flair and driver-focused engineering, and while it never achieved the sales volumes of Toyota or Honda, Mazda carved out a distinct space in the U.S. market. That modest scale once looked like insulation from global shocks. But when Trump's 25% tariffs came crashing down in 2025, Mazda discovered that being smaller didn't mean being safer. In fact, it meant vulnerability. The epicenter of Mazda's collapse was Mexico. For years, its Mexican plants were a lifeline, producing hundreds of thousands of vehicles bound for the American market. These factories gave Mazda a cost advantage, feeding U.S. dealerships with affordable models while keeping production flexible. But the tariffs made those exports prohibitively expensive almost overnight. Within just 4 months, Mazda's exports from Mexico to the United States collapsed by 28.5%. Plants that had been built and expanded specifically to supply American consumers suddenly stood idle, their output stuck behind tariff walls. For a company already operating on thin margins, that collapse was catastrophic. The damage rippled quickly through Mazda's operations. In desperation, the company halted production for Canada altogether and redirected resources in an attempt to salvage what was left of U.S. sales. But this strategy offered little relief. Costs continued to climb, demand continued to fall, and the company found itself squeezed from both sides. American consumers, already reeling from higher sticker prices across the industry, were not willing to pay premium prices for a niche Japanese brand, no matter how loyal its fan base had once been. For many families, buying a Mazda in 2025 became an unaffordable luxury, and showroom traffic dwindled into silence. As if the tariff-driven collapse weren't enough, a new threat appeared from across the Pacific: China. While Japanese and Korean automakers struggled to survive in the tariff-laden U.S. market, Chinese car makers, especially electric vehicle startups, began flooding global markets with aggressively priced models. These vehicles were not only cheaper but increasingly competitive in technology, range, and design. For Mazda, which had long relied on being the stylish, affordable alternative to the giants, this was an existential problem. The very niche it had carved out was being swallowed by newcomers who could offer more at a lower price. The surge of Chinese EVs didn't just eat into Mazda's already thin margins, it threatened to render the brand irrelevant. Number 4. Subaru. Subaru's story is a case study in how dependence on a single market can transform overnight from a strength into a crippling liability. For years, Subaru thrived in the United States, far more than in any other region. Its symmetrical all-wheel drive, safety-first engineering, and rugged, outdoorsy image resonated perfectly with American consumers in the Northeast, the Rockies, and Snowbelt states. Over 70% of Subaru's global sales came from the U.S., an astonishing level of reliance that no other major carmaker matched. As long as the American market was steady and predictable, this concentration was Subaru's greatest advantage. But once tariffs hit, that very reliance became a trap that left the company with almost no room to maneuver. The mechanics of the collapse start with costs. Even with some U.S. assembly capacity, Subaru's supply chain was global, and tariffs on imported components cascaded through the system. Powertrains, electronics, and safety modules arriving from Asia all jumped in price once the 25% duty was slapped on, while logistics and supplier surcharges piled on top. A model that might have needed a $2,500 price hike to preserve margins suddenly required increases closer to $5,000, or even $6,000. For middle-class families, the heart of Subaru's customer base, those price jumps were devastating. A Forester or Outback, once seen as the affordable, practical choice, was abruptly pushed into a price range that made buyers think twice. Demand began to crumble, not because loyalty disappeared, but because affordability evaporated. This triggered a vicious cycle between margins and volumes. Subaru's business model had always relied on steady throughput, modest incentives, and strong residual values. Tariffs forced it into a no-win situation. If it raised prices to protect margins, volumes collapsed, and factories ran below capacity, eroding efficiency and spreading fixed costs across fewer units. If it cut prices or offered incentives to defend volume, it destroyed residual values and squeezed margins even further. In either direction, the numbers turned red. Worse still, Subaru's signature all-wheel drive systems and advanced safety features, once its unique selling point, became liabilities because they added cost at precisely the moment customers were searching for the cheapest possible alternative. Dealers, too, felt the pressure. Subaru's retail network had thrived on fast sales and low inventory costs, but higher sticker prices lengthened days to turn. Financing those unsold cars became more expensive as wholesale values rose, and dealers leaned on the factory for extra support in the form of rebates and subsidized financing. Those costs flowed back to Subaru's balance sheet, further compressing profits. At the same time, trade-in values were bid up to keep deals alive, only to collapse at auctions where every dealer was playing the same game. Even the used car market, once a safety valve, buckled under the strain, leaving Subaru squeezed on both new and pre-owned fronts. The financial results were predictable. Analysts projected losses of up to $2.5 billion in fiscal 2026, a staggering sum for a company of Subaru's size. But the numbers only tell part of the story. The deeper issue was strategic. Subaru could not easily pivot to Europe or Southeast Asia like larger rivals. It had tied its identity, its operations, and its future so tightly to America that it had no real escape hatch. In effect, Subaru became a prisoner of its own dependence. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, and current affairs impacting your lives. Number 3. Nissan. For decades, Nissan executives referred to North America as the Golden Land, the place where growth was steady, margins were strong, and the future looked secure. In 2024, Nissan still ranked among the top 8 automakers in the US by sales volume, a market it had cultivated for decades with models like the Altima, Pathfinder, and Frontier. But by 2025, the Golden Land turned into a battlefield. Trump's sweeping 25% tariff on cars not made in the US instantly destroyed the profitability of Nissan's US operations. Unlike luxury automakers who can absorb higher prices into premium branding, Nissan relied heavily on middle-class consumers, buyers who were extremely sensitive to price shifts. Suddenly, models that once sold in the $25,000 to $30,000 range were pushed into unaffordable territory. Foot traffic at dealerships collapsed, financing became tougher, and loyalty evaporated. The result was staggering: a $5.3 billion loss in a single year, the worst financial hit in Nissan's history. This wasn't just a bad quarter or even a cyclical downturn, it was an existential collapse. For a company that had weathered oil shocks, recessions, and even corporate scandals, this tariff-induced loss struck at the very heart of its North American identity. The retreat began quickly and brutally. Production of key staples like the Pathfinder, Murano, and Frontier for the Canadian market was slashed, leaving gaps in a lineup that once anchored the brand's regional presence. In Mexico, the situation was even more dire. Nissan had invested heavily in manufacturing facilities south of the border, exporting more than 320,000 vehicles annually to the US. But the tariffs effectively slammed the door shut on that pipeline. Factories designed to be Nissan's production lifeline suddenly became liabilities. The impact went beyond balance sheets. The shutdowns threatened tens of thousands of workers across Mexico and the American Midwest who depended on Nissan's supply chain. Communities built around Nissan plants began to hollow out. Vendors, parts suppliers, and logistics networks saw contracts vanish. The ripple effect was so severe that analysts began questioning whether Nissan would maintain any meaningful presence in the US at all. Stock markets reflected the panic. After Trump's tariff announcement, Nissan's shares plunged 9.3% in 3 sessions, a wipeout that mirrored the despair inside the company's Tokyo headquarters. Investors began questioning whether Nissan could continue competing at all in the US market. For a brand that once saw America as its anchor, 2025 became the year that the anchor dragged it underwater. Number 2. Hyundai. Hyundai had positioned itself as one of America's fastest-growing challengers. Its reputation for affordable, stylish cars combined with a bold electric vehicle strategy made it a rising star. In fact, Hyundai's Georgia EV plant had been hailed as a cornerstone of U.S. clean energy ambitions, a facility meant to churn out the next generation of vehicles while creating thousands of American jobs. But in 2025, 2 crises collided. The first was tariffs. Like its Japanese rivals, Hyundai faced the crushing weight of Trump's 25% levy on cars not made in the U.S. Costs on imported components skyrocketed. The company's second quarter earnings report revealed a $66 million loss and a 16% plunge in operating profit. For a brand that had grown rapidly in the U.S. on the back of thin but steady margins, those numbers were devastating. The second crisis, however, cut even deeper, and it wasn't financial. In the summer of 2025, immigration raids struck Hyundai's Georgia plant. In a single sweep, U.S. authorities arrested 475 Korean workers, many of them engineers and technicians critical to the company's flagship EV program. Overnight, Hyundai's ambitious plan to produce 8,500 new American jobs disintegrated. The factory floor, once buzzing with activity, was thrown into limbo. Assembly lines went dark. Entire projects were shelved indefinitely. The shock spread quickly beyond the plant. Families in Georgia woke up to discover that breadwinners had vanished into detention centers. Communities that had pinned their hopes on Hyundai's payroll found themselves suddenly adrift. Local economies, like restaurants, schools, and housing markets, all built on the promise of Hyundai's expansion, were left reeling. Inside Hyundai's boardrooms, the sense of betrayal ran deep. Here was a company that had invested billions in America, promised jobs, and positioned itself as a partner in the country's clean energy transition. Yet instead of stability, it faced tariffs that destroyed profitability and immigration raids that decapitated its workforce. The message was clear: the U.S. was no longer a safe bet. The fallout is visible on the ground. Hyundai's EV ambitions in the U.S. have been effectively frozen. Supply chains meant to support the plant have been redirected. Engineers once assigned to Georgia have been recalled to Seoul. Number 1. Toyota. For decades, Toyota wasn't just another foreign automaker in America. It was the benchmark of success. By 2024, Toyota had become the number 1 automaker by sales volume in the U.S., selling 1.98 million vehicles, ahead of Ford and Chevrolet. That dominance was built on decades of brand loyalty around cars like the Corolla and Camry, models praised for affordability, reliability, and low maintenance. For millions of middle-class families, Toyota wasn't a luxury. It was the rational choice, a car you could trust for 10 years or more without breaking the bank. But this dominance has been shattered almost overnight. The trigger came when President Donald Trump announced sweeping 25% tariffs on cars not made in the U.S. It was a move pitched as patriotic, framed as a way to bring jobs home and punish foreign competitors. Yet for Toyota, whose U.S. strategy depended heavily on a global supply chain, the announcement was catastrophic. Immediately after the tariff news broke, Toyota's stock plunged 9.4% in 3 sessions, wiping billions off its market capitalization. And the shockwaves didn't stop at the stock exchange. Analysts like Vivek Vaidya of Frost & Sullivan warned that Toyota was likely to be the worst hit among Japanese automakers because of its enormous exposure to the American market. Unlike some rivals who could lean more on Europe or Asia, Toyota had gone all in on America, a gamble that now looks reckless. By 2025, Toyota is staring down projected losses of $9.5 billion, losses so steep they erase years of growth in one fiscal stroke. At the center of this implosion lies Toyota's ambitious electric vehicle program. The company had bet big on EVs, positioning them as the future of its North American operations. But those plans depended on lithium-ion batteries and specialized parts sourced from Asia. With tariffs slapping a 25% penalty on imports, those batteries instantly became prohibitively expensive, throwing the entire EV rollout into disarray. Dealerships across the U.S. felt the consequences immediately. Cars that were once priced competitively now cost $6,000 to $8,000 more than they did just a year earlier. Customers who had long trusted Toyota walked into showrooms only to walk out in frustration. For families already squeezed by inflation and rising interest rates, those price hikes were a breaking point. Many chose instead to buy used cars or to keep repairing older vehicles. The result? Foot traffic collapsed, and sales volumes fell sharply. Toyota's American dream, built over decades of careful marketing and production, has begun unraveling. The company's market share is shrinking, and its once loyal customer base is quietly slipping away. Worse, inside Toyota's boardrooms, the discussion has shifted. It's no longer just about weathering the storm. Executives are now openly debating whether the U.S. market is worth the fight at all. Do you think tariffs really protect American workers, or are they destroying the very jobs they promised to save? Isn't it true that Trump already knows he is destroying industries instead of building them? In the comment section below, share your thoughts on who is really gaining from all this. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, changing world order, and current affairs. Things you need to stay informed. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.